Welcome back to the How to Retire channel. I'm your host, Patrick King. My guest today is Benjamin Brandt, host of the Retirement Starts Today podcast and author of the new book also titled Retirement Starts Today. I've known Ben for years and I'm excited to have him on the channel. In his new book, Ben discusses how your retirement can and should start right now, how you can experiment with different retirements beforehand, and why you shouldn't take your Monte Carlo numbers too seriously. And with no further ado, here's my interview with Ben. All right, I'm here with Benjamin Brandt, financial planner extraordinaire, host of the Retirement Starts Today podcast, and now new author of Retirement Starts Today, an amazing book. Benjamin, tell me a little bit about Retirement Starts Today. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but there's actually a little bit more to it than that.
Well, thanks for having me. I wanted to write a non-financial retirement book. A lot of times on the podcast, we'll talk about financial topics, we'll talk about non-financial topics, but I came up with the idea that there's really two ways to mess up retirement. And on my show, I was only solving for the first one, which is don't run out of money, right? I think our whole industry kind of focuses on that one, don't run out of money. But the second one I came up with was don't die with regret. And I backed into that, and you've been an advisor for a long time too. So maybe I'm sure you've had these appointments where you're visiting with someone, and we start talking about an inheritance. And I'm working with retirees, so they're 60, and their parents are in their 80s or 90s, and it would happen so frequently I could almost anticipate it, where they would say, "I don't need this money. My mom is not spending the money. She always talked about how she wanted to go to Spain and visit where her grandparents grew up, and she wanted to take the kids to Disneyland, but she never did it. And now she's too old to spend the money." And so that's where dying with regret came from. So there's two ways to mess up retirement: running out of money and dying with regret. And so this book is solving for the second half is, how do I craft this retirement thing through the scope of financial independence? And I don't want to die with regret. I saved up all this money. I want to be healthy enough and cognizant enough to spend it in a way that's fulfilling and fruitful.
That's awesome. And I certainly, over the years that I've practiced, I've seen a lot of that, where I feel like a lot of the clients that I've worked with at some point realize, hey, I'm not going to run out. And then it becomes, okay, now what are we going to do with this? And in the cases where they're maybe too old to do some of those things, there is a factor of that regret. So I do try to encourage people to think about that. Sometimes the message isn't well received, because sometimes when you're working, 40, 50 hours a week for several decades, you're just over it.
Yeah, right.
So in the book, you talk about your future self, and tell me a little bit more about that concept and how it applies to retirement.
Yeah, so future self is a relatively new, or at least in vogue topic with like psychology. And I was in a mastermind group for a couple of years with a guy by the name of Dr. Benjamin Hardy, who actually wrote the foreword to the book. And he wrote a book called Be Your Future Self Now, which I think is sort of the best accidental retirement book that I've ever read. Everything that I'm consuming with my brain, but then also, my retirement brain as well, right? I'm thinking about, there's so many concepts here that would apply through the scope of through the lens of financial independence. And so what Ben talks about in his book is you want to be drawn forward by a compelling and exciting future rather than being propelled by your past. And that has so many carryover concepts to retirement planning, because you may have been a teacher or a fireman or financial advisor for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years. And you may choose to take that with you into retirement or not. It's entirely up to you. It's much like a high school or a college graduation, in that now I have my certificate, I can go out and do something in the world. It's the same thing with retirement. You've graduated from your career. Now you've got the certificate of financial independence. You can go pursue really anything you want. It's the ideal time for reinvention. If you want to get a leather jacket and pierce your ears, you're more than welcome to. Or you can, reinvent yourself in other creative ways. But so I want to help people create an exciting future, dependent or not dependent on their past. That may have nothing to do with your future at all. You might have been a teacher for 40 years, and now you only want to pick and choose 2 or 3 things from that career and then intentionally create that in retirement. So I want to encourage people to really parse what they like and what they don't like about their current retired lives, career and otherwise, and then we get to just take with us what we want and leave everything else behind through financial independence.
That's awesome. I mean, as someone who has, maybe not going through this process as formally as that, but, trying to live my life intentionally, that resonates with me. But if you're someone out there watching this and you're thinking about, okay, what does that look like? If you're somebody who's not quite sure what that future destination is, how do you go about that? Do you just start moving forward, or you think about it? Like, what does that process look like?
You gather data. So I know this is a non-financial book, but we're going to a little bit about data. So data is always good, even when it's bad. So we need to make investments that could be time investments, money investments, emotional investments in what we think our future self might be interested in. And good data is good and bad data is good. What we don't want to do is wait until retirement and then make big bets on what we think we might like. Like, I'm going to go spend $500,000 on an RV, or I'm going to go spend $100,000 on a bass boat, or I'm going to join a country club that is, crazy expensive and buy a bunch of stuff that goes along with that, and then hope that that's what my future self wants to do. We want to make these little investments while we're still working, and then that's going to give us clarity. Like, take some pickleball lessons. Hopefully you hate it, right? Then that's one less thing that you can have to investigate on the other side of financial independence. Get data. What do you love about your job? Yeah, you might be an engineer, but there's 10 things that are involved in being an engineer. I love mentoring the younger generation. I love bringing a project in under budget and on time. I love standing at the water cooler and chewing the cud with my friends, right? I want to identify specifically what I like and what I don't like and get that data, and then say, how can I intentionally create that on the other side of retirement or financial independence or part-time work or whatever retirement means to you. It can mean literally dozens of different things depending on your situation. But so we need to gather data. And the only way that we can do that is by being hyper intentional and reflective and introspective about what we're doing, and then just trying new things out. One of the things, and I'll put you on the spot. I had this idea of $500 and a time machine. So the hard part about retirement planning, I think, is that we are served up this big idea of retirement at the point in our lives where we're probably the least creative, but we're the most financially independent, right? For a lot of the engineers and the software engineers and people that I talk to, they're like beaten down and burnt out by the corporate world, right? They've had one too many Slack notifications and one too many Zoom meetings, and they just can't take it anymore. So they call me to retire, right? And they're their least creative. And now we're saying, oh, let's go create this like wonderful new reinvention. And they're like, my brain is mush. Like the corporate world just, drained it out of me. And so what we came up with is, let's take an idea of financial independence and let's bring it to our most creative self. So I said that was 13 years old. 13 years old represents your least financial independent, but you're enough of a kid that you're creative, but enough of an adult that you can maybe, make executive decisions. So we're taking $500, we're jumping in a time machine, and we're visiting Patrick at 13 years old. What you got to spend the money by the end of the day, and you got to spend it on yourself. What would you buy?
Oh yeah, probably some sort of like remote control airplane, for sure.
Perfect. Now, that doesn't mean you could afford that now, but that doesn't mean that's what you have to do. But we can use that piece of data and we can say, okay, what are we interested in? We're interested in modeling, right? Could we go to the public library and teach a class? I took a class with my kids on model rocketry. Actually, one of my clients was teaching it, and he's actually in the book. Surprise! His name's Corey. Shout out Corey. And he taught a model rocket class, right? Could you go and take flight lessons, right? Could you go, maybe travel is a big part of that. Could you go throw bags for Delta Airlines and get free flights as part of your retirement, right? There are so many different things that we could brainstorm by identifying what was it about that specific thing. I said I would buy, it was 1994, I was listening to Green Day, I would buy a drum kit and learn how to play it. And I did buy a drum kit, but I did not yet learn how to play it. A high-ranking member of my family that will go unnamed bought a treadmill, and so my drums are now living in a very sad corner of my basement, yet to be learned. I've messed around with them quite a bit, but so I bought the drums. Step one, I'm still in the gathering data phase. But okay. So that's what I would do. I'd get data, good data, bad data. It's all good. What you don't like could potentially be as important as what you do like. But we need to intentionally create that on the other side of retirement. Long-winded way of saying that.
That is awesome. I do want to know if you got like the full Neil Peart Rush kit, or was it a little bit more of a Green
whatever they had on Craigslist is what I got. Yeah, I went to some guy's house and it was in his basement, and I brought one of my kids for protection, and we loaded it up in the Suburban and drove off. I think I spent like $500. It was awesome.
I mean, I love that. I mean, I think really there's so much that could come from that, and you never know where it can take you. And I think this is kind of to your point. I feel like for me, going through a big life change, I bought a camera and started, I wanted to take travel photos, and this has turned into this YouTube channel. So you never know where these things can take you. And then again, you go through these times where, hey, this isn't right for me. And for me, that example was, speaking of Rush, which I loved as a kid, I picked up a bass guitar at one point, and I'm like, I physically do not have the hand strength to play a bass. So yeah, I've got like kind of short arms. I've got T-Rex arms. So that was a failed experiment, but luckily Guitar Center was okay with me bringing it back in 30 days. Crossed it off the list.
Did the Guitar Center, did they have the No Stairway to Heaven sign like they had in Wayne's World? Is that still a thing?
They actually did not have the No Stairway to Heaven sign, which I was a little disappointed,
Yeah, okay.
A little Wayne's World reference there, but
Yeah.
But so I'm with you there. So what is a good strategy for someone while they're still working to have these little experiments? Like how are you coaching your clients through this type of small stakes experiments over time?
There's a number of different ways that we can do it. If it's a time question, there's something like $54 billion that gets unused every year in unused vacation pay. And the people that are accumulating vacation pay are the exact people that need to use it the most, especially coming up to retirement planning.
Yeah.
So if it's a time issue, I'm going to encourage people to use their vacation time to work on retirement planning, take lessons, whatever that might be. You think you want to spend your retirement in an RV, I want you to take a week off and rent an RV and actually drive it around and see if that is as fulfilling as you think it is. If you think you're going to play golf your entire retirement, I want you to book an Airbnb in Scottsdale and play golf for a full week and see if you're sick of it. Right? We need this good data and bad data. So if it's a time thing, I want you to use your vacation pay. If it's a money thing, your clients and my clients tend to be super savers, meaning that they were ready for retirement financially probably years before they actually pulled the trigger and quit working. So what we would do is, go to fidelity.com or vanguard.com and build like a minimum viable product retirement plan. If you're listening to this podcast, you're likely already there. But if that's the case, then we can actually slow down or stop making 401k contributions. And now we've liberated like $1,500 a month that we can go get these data points with, where I can go take scuba diving lessons, or I can go take bass guitar lessons, or whatever it is. So if it's a time thing, you've probably got vacation pay we can use. If it's a money thing, we could probably pump the brakes a little bit on our retirement plan contributions. So either way, money or time, we can use what we already have to make your retirement even better.
So this sounds like a lot of fun. But what is the minimum acceptable Monte Carlo probability of success for this?
Oh, 110%. Don't even think about it. Tell you 110%. I want your plan to be so tight it squeaks. No, I hate Monte Carlo analysis, not because I hate statistics. I do like statistics, but because every human that I've ever encountered uses Monte Carlo wrong. I'm going to record a video about this. It probably will get me kicked out of the CFP club, but no, Monte Carlo is used criminally incorrectly. And I could tell you why if you're curious. It has to do with ice cream, but
well, don't just stop with ice cream.
Oh, that's my okay, yeah. So Monte Carlo analysis, likelihood of success, which if we flip likelihood of success is just likelihood of adjustment. And you'd say I'm crazy if at 30 years old I planned out my life to the penny to 60, right? You'd say you're not leaving room for any excitement on the upside. But that's exactly what we're doing with a Monte Carlo analysis at 60 to go to 90, that same 30-year period, saying I'm going to plan it out to the penny. And so when we get on these calculators with no guidance, we say, okay, well, I don't want to run out of money, right? I'm just solving for the one way I can mess up retirement. I need my likelihood of success to be 100%. That's a passing grade. I can't have 70%, right? Because that's a bad grade. So I was not an A student. This might shock you to learn that I was kind of a C student. But when I would really dedicate myself and I'd get a good grade, my mom would take me out for ice cream. So when I was in my formative years, those wires connected to my brain that 100% is a good grade and mom's going to take me out for ice cream. If I bring home a 70% retirement score from my mom, right, she's probably going to take away my Walkman and I'm going to be in big trouble, right? So, but a 70% likelihood of success is a 30% chance of adjustment. In my mind, that's completely within the realms of not only possible, but good. The only way to get 100% is either double the amount of money that you have, which is hard to do unless we're like gambling on Dogecoin or something, or reduce our income expectations by half. And that's what everybody does. They'll say, okay, well, I guess I don't really want $8,000 a month in retirement income. I want $4,000 because that's what makes my Monte Carlo score so high. And you just robbed yourself of a decade of fun stuff because you don't understand how Monte Carlo works and nobody gives you good guidance. Wealth management firms do bear some of this responsibility. The way that I'm compensated is by assets under management. So if I was an unscrupulous advisor, I would say, oh no, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you should only spend 4% or 3% or 1% per year. That's the safe withdrawal rate because it makes my assets under management bigger. So I, at the risk of putting on my tinfoil hat, there are perverse incentives at play that make sure people use Monte Carlo bad. In my, tinfoil hat, sorry, I'm polluting your channel with bad ideas, but
absolutely not. It's a tool I say it's a tool in the toolbox. And whenever I meet with clients, I always try to preface that conversation when we go over the Monte Carlo. It's like, well, number one, it's like the old Mark Twain quote, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And this is statistics. So we need to kind of couch our expectations of the meaningfulness of this conversation in that phrase. And number two, I often say, look, this is a test you don't want to get an A in. Right? Because I was an A student. But I also did.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest, by the way.
Well, it also explains why I'm socially awkward too, because I just did not go. I was studying too much. So that's one thing I always try to couch this conversation. It's a tool in the toolbox. 4% is, if you look back at the actual study, a little conservative. And okay, we can spend more. Again. My experience shows me that a lot of these people, once you get to a certain age, you just know that you're going to have more than you're ever going to spend. So there's that push and pull between, your two ways that you can mess up your retirement, regret and running out of money. I've seen more people have regret than crash and burn. I've seen a couple of people crash and burn. That's no fun. But yeah, I think the Monte Carlo is a useful tool, but it's not the end all be all for sure.
Right. Our focus is running out of money. And the 100% likelihood of success is the running out of money on the downside, right? We're creating this plan and we're saying, I don't want to run out of money. But it's equally as likely, and maybe even more likely because we have a long compounding period of 30 plus years in retirement, the upside surprise. So 100% likelihood of success removes the upside surprise. What if we spend so much time thinking about, I'm going to retire and then the market's going to crash, right? Murphy's Law. What about the opposite? What if the day you retire, a new industrial revolution powered by AI starts and we have a 15-year bull cycle in the market and you could have quadrupled your income, but you were married to that 100% likelihood of success. And rather than taking out $25,000 a month out of your IRA, you only took out $5,000 because that's what the 100% likelihood of success, which is the worst case scenario, said that you could do. So we're hyperfixated on the worst case scenario, but in reality, upside surprise is equally or more so likely. We're talking stats here. We're not talking about, some guy on the internet that wants you to spend money. That's how stats work, right? We've got a bell curve and we could be on the happy side. We just assume we're going to be on the sad side.
Yeah. And so that's variable change, right? So if we, or the end of history illusion, which works in a couple of different ways in this scenario. Number one, on the returns in the Monte Carlo bit, where, if you even think about Moore's Law, the computer processing speed, like that's still held. And I think it's actually ahead of Moore's Law curve, which is crazy, which means that we're going to have continued development in technology and which is going to fire up the economy. And then for our lives. I love
Moore's Law.
What's that?
I love Moore's Law. It's right there, Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil, he wrote a sequel to The Singularity is Near. It's The Singularity is Nearer. It's an excellent retirement book, but he talks about Moore's Law. And he says the cell phone in your pocket, we're 25 years removed. So within a retirement generation, we're 25 years removed from IBM would have paid over $1 billion for that phone, and you can get it for $60 at Walmart. So that's what we're investing in with our retirement plans, is we're investing in this human innovation that sometimes slows down, sometimes pauses, but never stops. So the thing in your pocket used to cost $1 billion in computation power, doing Moore's Law backwards, like 25 or 30 years ago. So if you think the market is overvalued or something's going to burst, you are missing the forest for the trees. I think we're in an industrial revolution of technology. It's amazing for retirees. It's amazing for their independence. I rode in a self-driving car in Phoenix a few months ago.
Wow.
Love Moore's Law. It's one of my most exciting retirement topics to talk about. I probably don't fully understand it. It's like the Dunning-Kruger of Moore's Law. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it absolutely makes sense. I'm a big believer, long term, that upside surprise equally as likely. But I think for me, the flip side of that, and this plays into the future self, I think, is that end of history illusion, where we tend to extrapolate our current situation out into that future, into that 30-year retirement, and we don't really recognize how much we can change. A good example that I live is that I've got a 3-mile walk loop around the house that goes over the pedestrian bridge of Georgia 400. And, 10 years ago, I was on that Georgia 400 going to work, not envisioning the fact that, I could be someone that owned their own practice and having a YouTube channel. And then, first of all, I didn't even live there. So that person in the car, the Patrick in that car, could have never envisioned the Patrick 10 years later that was actually have that as his 3-mile walk loop. So I think that's equally important to think about in this retirement conversation too, is that, Moore's Law or variable change or end of history illusion, we tend to underestimate how different things are or can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Upside surprise. I mean, maybe you haven't had grandkids yet. Maybe there are so many things that could change for the better. If we're focused on worst case scenarios, it's going to be so hard to take advantage of that because we don't have an adaptable variable spending strategy. We're locked in, and we're carving our retirement budget into stone tablets and basically saying, I can never deviate from this plan. And I think that's a recipe for regret, and I want to help you avoid that.
All right, so we're talking about this upside surprise. Tell me about something that's in the book that you say, if you don't fly first class, your kids will.
Yes, one of my favorite sayings. So I'm a dad. I've got 6 kids, and so financial independence for me has a lot to do with kicking the kids out. We often would say, get the freeloaders offloaded, right? Kick those kids to the curb. And if you don't fly first class, your kids will. So again, we talked about gathering data, right? For a lot of our clients, they're super savers, and they got there through frugality and disciplined investing. So the same muscles that allowed us to save up a few or several $1 million are not the same muscles we need to spend that money. So we need to gather data. So I have them fly first class. I twist their arm and I say, flying first class is so much more comfortable and convenient, and it's much more likely to get you to take those trips that you've been meaning to take and haven't taken yet. And they always push back, right? Because these are frugal super savers. And I say, prove us both wrong. Prove that you'll hate it and you never have to do it again. But more often than not, it's a more comfortable flying experience. They have more money. I want to coach this. They have more money than they're able to spend. They're not being flippant or, crazy. This is all through the guidance of a written financial plan. But I make them fly first class. And more often than not, they travel more, longer, and more comfortably than they would have otherwise. So it's a metaphor, flying first class, but it also literally means I want you to fly first class. But the metaphor is, I want you to spend this money on you because you saved it up for you. I'm sure your kids will be super excited to inherit millions of dollars, but that's not why we saved it up. I would like to see you spend it on you. And if we can't accomplish that, I want to see you spend it on others or in service to others. There's a chance that we could have some bit of immortality if we spend some of this money that we've been saving our whole lives and we spend it on making memories with people that we care about. When you think about, loved ones that you had that have passed on, you're likely thinking about peak experiences that you had with them. Like I think about my grandparents are both gone. We used to go to the family reunion in Albion, Nebraska, and visit the Corn Palace in Mitchell, South Dakota. And we would pack sandwiches and Pepsis in a cooler, and we would drive in the Griswold family station wagon, right? Yeah, that cost like inflation adjusted $12 to do, right? It doesn't have to be big money, but they took the time and the money to make those memories with me. So in a way that they're like semi-immortal, because I'll have that. I'm doing versions of that with my kids that I learned from my grandparents. So I'm sort of combining ideas of if you don't fly first class, you will, and what if you can't take it with you? But I think it's all about converting those dollars that we saved our whole life for, converting that into something meaningful today. And that's really hard to do for people that have only been saving up to this very moment in their lives, and now they need permission from a plan or an advisor or someone, a family member to spend it. And so this is your permission. I want you to go spend that money.
And it's so hard to change that mindset. I've experienced, at least, from saving to spending. It's a huge mindset shift. And, for maybe those people who are a little touch and go, who maybe don't quite have enough, like tell me, you mentioned like quieter dreams. Like what should those people be thinking about in your experience when it comes to future self?
Yeah, the quieter dreams can be just as big as kind of the big spending ones, but I think the secret is in service to others. I think maybe I already mentioned that a little bit earlier, but there's so many neat things that people can do. I tell a story about the local public library where people, there was a woman named Miss Sparkle who read to the kids. And then I also talk about my wife's grandpa, who was the unofficial chauffeur for like the fifth grade class. Yeah. And he did multiple fifth grade classes after my wife stopped being in fifth grade, to field trips to the zoo and things like that. All these things that cost basically no money and were in service to others, but it created some great meaning for other people. Kids is often an example, but you could be mentoring, young people that are, a few generations behind you. But we've got the money, but don't necessarily hyper focus on that. Focus on the thing that we can convert that into. And sometimes that's a very low dollar amount, high impact items.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to these ideas of meaning, I think that service to others, I think is a great jumping off point. I think an idea like purpose can get a little sticky sometimes. There was a recent podcast episode that you hosted with big P purpose and little P purpose. And I think that's, if you're interested in that, if purpose is something that might get you a little caught up around the axle, I'm just asking this for a friend, not me personally. That's a great podcast episode to go check out of Ben's. But yeah, that taking you out of it, taking your ego out of it and saying, hey, in service to others, I think that's a great way to approach that. So how can retirees or soon to be retirees move out of this kind of scarcity mindset, this 100% Monte Carlo probability mindset, and into more of an attitude of abundance?
I think good data and bad data. One of the things we talk about in the book is, if you're a super saver and the most you've ever spent on a vacation is $3,000, it's going to be really difficult for me to explain to you that you're really going to love a $15,000 vacation. That's just something that isn't in your wheelhouse right now. So one of the activities that we think about is go back to your last vacation and write down everything that you can remember about the vacation. Okay, we drove to St. Louis, we stayed at a Motel 6, we ate at McDonald's, and we, did our grocery shopping, whatever, right? And that all totaled up is $3,000. What if we made you, gun to your head, spend $9,000? We had to triple every line item. How would we do that? Okay, well, I wouldn't drive. Maybe I would fly. I wouldn't stay at a Motel 6. Maybe I'd stay at the Four Seasons. I wouldn't, eat at McDonald's. I'd, go to Zagat's and sort for highest rated restaurants, something like that, right? I'd make it an experience. And so spend it on paper, right? If you're a super saver, if you're a hyper accumulator, right? That might be how your brain works. And then we spend it on paper. And then we just analyze. We visit with our significant other, and we just analyze, is there any chance that I would enjoy that? And if it's a hard no, we move on to the next. And if it's a maybe, that's good data. So that's one way. If we're not focusing on Monte Carlo, because that's one way we could try to get more abundance. It's the opposite, right? I want to improve your confidence, but not your confidence score, because that's the opposite. That makes you more conservative. So I want to get you practicing spending this money, even if it's just on paper. Then we want to convert that to data. Bad data is the same as good data when we're being introspective, and then we intentionally create our ideal retirement. So we're being pulled forward by an exciting future rather than propelled by our past.
Gotcha. And so, and maybe even like the most difficult and elusive scenario, as you phrase it, to have your cake and eat it too, or as I like to say, the both and plan.
Yeah.
Because I think, at the end of the day, and this is kind of the conundrum I have, especially with creating these videos, is that everyone's like, okay, I need to figure the equation piece out. There's two questions to life. I guess it lines up with your 2 ways to mess up your retirement. It's like retirement's like answering 2 questions. What do I want to do? And then can I pay for that? And everyone kind of starts with, can I pay for that?
Right.
But really it loops back to that, what do I want to do question. And there's no reason we can't start doing that today. And it seems like those experiments in testing things out, getting data, you put that forth as your idea of your have your cake and eat it too method of doing this. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, we have so many options available to us. Sometimes people will come to me and they say, I want to start doing those retirement things, but I get a lot of fulfillment from work and I don't have time to do both. So one of the concepts we came up with is have your cake and eat it too. And that's essentially pausing retirement plan contributions as long as, we have a plan to back that up. And then maybe switching to part-time. So I can still do all of the work stuff, but I'm living life in balance that I'm also now doing retired stuff. I tell a story in the book about a woman who moved down to part-time, partially for retirement reasons, but also partially for boundary reasons, right? Her role is expanding because she was really good at her job.
Oh, yeah.
So they're giving her more stuff to do. So she dropped down to part-time to reinforce those boundaries. And she wanted some help paying for health insurance and some other things. And then they got in an RV and they worked from the beach in Florida, from their RV. So you're having your cake and eating it too. She's still a useful part of a team that she's getting fulfillment from. She's doing projects and bringing them to the finish line, which she really liked, working with her executive team. But then also she was doing the retired stuff where they would spend half of the year in the Midwest, and then they would have their RV down south. And they were, work from home, and the home was this beautiful RV. So through the lens of financial independence, and if you're a super saver and you're there, many people are there before they actually retire, we can use that and we can sort of, reorganize the poker chips on the table. And we could say, there's a lot of this retired stuff we could do now before we even retire. And again, some people can't envision the fulfillment that they get from work outside of work. So
True.
That tells me we got to create a plan that we're not fully retired for a long time, maybe forever.
I love that idea. That's something I've actually tried to build into my life. Is that both and plan to have your cake and eat it too? It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard. Here. It takes some time. I feel like, and you mentioned that in the book too. It's a process that starts over a period of years. So I think I want to end our interview with a quote from your book, and that's, no person I've ever worked with has ever said that they believed financial security would fulfill them as a human being. I think that's amazing. The book is Retirement Starts Today. The podcast is Retirement Starts Today. Go check out Benjamin's book and his podcast. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. This is an amazing book. I absolutely love it. I think it's a huge benefit to anyone that picks it up. And I'm grateful to have you here and to know you.
The feeling is fully mutual. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben.